Broadcasting live from Lothal. Good morning, Lothal. It's the Unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to Good Morning Lothal, the Unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast. I'm your host, Pete Salas, along with
Rolando Zamora.
How we doing, Rolly?
I'm good. I'm hanging in there. It's been a long, busy week, and I'm excited to do the podcast with you like I always am. How are you?
I'm good, man. I've like I was telling you off mic, I'm having a little bit of back issues, but nothing's gonna stop, as usual. Nothing's gonna stop this train called Good Morning Lothal. That's how we do.
Yeah, I think we're both feeling it today, right? I was telling you too how I have a really bad headache as we're recording. So if you guys are watching and I'm making weird faces or or anything seems off with me, that's what's going on today.
Right. Like if at some point he keels over, you know why? Well, we'll try to work around it, but it's all good. So I'm excited to talk about today's episode. I really enjoyed it. It is season 2, episode 17. It's called The Honorable Ones. But before we get to that, this is the part where I ask you guys to once again like, share, subscribe, and rate if you haven't done so already. Like I said, this was a really good episode of Rebels. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But before we get to that, Rolly, what's happening around the galaxy?
Let's see what's happening this week in Star Wars.
All right, guys, so we got a lot happening this week in Star Wars, so a lot to talk about, a lot of exciting news, and a lot of shows to catch up on and look forward to. First and foremost, this actually happened today as we're recording Monday, January 23rd. The first set of guest announcements for Star Wars Celebration, which is happening in London this year, April 7th to the 10th, rolled out today. So I just want to point out some of those highlights for you guys. First and foremost, we had Anthony Daniels, who obviously plays C-3PO.
Wow, how old is that guy now, man? Like, I mean, that guy's a trooper. That guy has been around since day one.
Yeah, but, absolutely. And then personal favorite of mine, as you guys already know, Ashley Eckstein.
There's your
voices
girl.
Ahsoka Tano. Mm-hmm. Another favorite of mine, D. Bradley Baker, who voices all the clones in the animated series of all Star Wars.
Right.
And then here's one that I know you love in particular, Giancarlo Esposito, who plays Moff Gideon in Mandalorian. And then to round off the list, we have Indira Varma, who plays Tala Durath in Kenobi. You guys might remember her also from Game of Thrones. She actually plays Pedro Pascal's wife in that show.
Yeah,
who is Din Djarin in the Mando. And then we have another favorite of mine, Matt Lancer, who voices Anakin Skywalker in the Clone Wars. So I'm actually going to a con in March, and I'm finally going to meet Matt Lancer and James Arnold Taylor.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I haven't met them, so I'm excited. They play Anakin and Obi-Wan respectively, so I can't wait to meet them in Chicago.
Okay. And then just a little bit closer to home, in a few months, fingers crossed, there's no changes. Giancarlo Esposito is supposed to be here in town for us.
I saw that.
For our local
South
con.
Texas Comic Con? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just definitely that's definitely a must meet and must get him to sign my Moff Gideon pop. I was trying to get a Gus Fring Funko Pop. That's his character that he played on Breaking Bad, but they are so out of my realm of. I mean, I of course I can afford it. It's only a couple $100, but it's a little tight, get something like that just because I need it signed. So I already have a Moff Gideon. I'll settle for that.
Yeah, I should definitely look into getting something signed too. There's kind of these characters. I think you just appreciate his acting work altogether. You've seen way more shows than I have that he's in, but as a Star Wars fan, and it's a local con, it's a great con at that, I should probably make it a point to get something signed Mandalorian related and just get something going in that department. Right. I'm a big fan of autographs. It's just I've hit the pause button on that recently, but I want to pick back up on it, especially with my Star Wars autographs.
Absolutely. And I think I cut you off before you got to the last one on the list there of who's going to be at Star Wars Celebration, a favorite of all of ours.
Yeah, Vivian Lyra Blair, who plays young Leia in Kenobi. Yep. It would be really cool to meet her at some point while she's still little. Just to meet her in character, so to say.
Yep.
So in other Star Wars news, we actually had some really cool interviews. This just kind of came up out of nowhere. I don't know if they were timed together or it's just coincidence, but Alden Ehrenreich, who plays Han Solo in Solo: A Star Wars Story, and Daisy Ridley, who plays Rey, of course, in the sequel trilogy, they were interviewed by two different respective companies. I know for sure Daisy Ridley was talking to IMDb. I don't remember who Alden was talking to, but of course they're Star Wars actors, so they always get asked the question, are you coming back to Star Wars? Are you interested in coming back to Star Wars?
Right.
More emphasis on that second question because these are movies that were not received well by the fans, as we know. So fans want to know if there's any insight. And it was really cool to hear both of them basically say, yeah, I would be totally interested to come back. Daisy really basically said, hey, I'm a phone call away. Just give me a call.
Right.
And Alden was really cool because he seemed to really enjoy playing Solo. I know you and I have spoken about him before, and we're both really big fans of how he portrayed Han in that movie. And it seems that in his response, which I did not transcribe, but he was really excited to say, hey, I loved playing Solo. I'd love to play him again in the future. And that's something that I would definitely look forward to. Also, Lando, Donald Glover, that would be a really cool, just get more of them together.
Right, there's so much story still left to tell on that one.
Yeah. So I thought that was some really cool tidbits in Star Wars news this week. And then before we get to the big one, I'm going to save that for last. I want to talk about the Bad Batch season 2 really quick. We got a new episode this past Wednesday, episode 4. I don't remember the name. I should have written it down, but yeah, it was a tech episode, and I was just blown away that they chose that character to feature. I think I said it last week. He's probably like the least interesting. So
and they probably know that. I mean, as far as the writers, the hierarchy of the popularity of the characters, I'm pretty sure they know that he's one of the last ones on the list in most people's lists. But that's probably why they did it, is just to kind of give him a little spin-off episode, which it was funny. Like, I was thinking to myself, like, man, they haven't had the last 2 episodes. They haven't had the full Bad Batch group together, and I'm thinking to myself, like, well, maybe like the actors are busy doing something else, and then I'm like, wait a minute, it's all the same guy. It's all the same guy, and I'm like, oh my god, what an idiot. But this is one of those that could be defined as a filler episode.
As a filler, yes,
definitely. It kind of had just kind of a little spin-off. Let's see what these guys are doing, and it was kind of tell them about the premise of the episode, I guess.
Yeah, so basically the premise of the episode is Sid, who's kind of like the gangster head who the Batch is working for to make money. Mm-hmm. She's into racing, and it was cool because it was kind of like pod racing. It was called something else, but it was basically, for all intents and purposes, some form of pod racing.
Right.
So she's a big bettor, and she has a racer that she now has in the races, so to say, and come to find out that racer's a droid, and he's actually voiced by Ben Schwartz, which was a hot topic in Star Wars conversation this week on Twitter, because people were apparently incredibly annoyed. And
I don't get it. I love the dude. I love that. I said that when it was his birthday a few months ago. Like, I love the dude and everything. He voices BB-8. He was. If you have ever watched Parks and Recreation, he steals every single scene that he's in, and he's not in many of them. He's not a cast regular, but every time he's on there, you just die laughing, or at least I do. Maybe I guess, like you said, Twitter really divided the camps between pro Ben and anti Ben, but I don't know.
Yeah, it was funny because I saw one tweet in particular where somebody said Star Wars finally did it. They somehow managed to make a character that was more annoying than Jar Jar Binks.
Oh, come on. That's awful, man.
Yeah, I thought it was a bit much too, because the whole point was the droid is incredibly cocky about his racing skills. So that's the kind of the way he voiced him. I thought it was spot on. So when I saw all the stuff being said, I was like, I was kind of confused. I didn't understand it. It was totally.
I mean, did you mind him in this episode? Did you mind the character?
No, not at all. I think, like I said, they portrayed him. He was a cocky droid.
Right.
Tech was telling them how to race better, basically, and he wasn't having anything of it. And I just love how he gets destroyed.
I was going to say, like, I mean, for the people who didn't like him, I mean, he got destroyed twice. So what more do you want anyway? Yeah,
so there was basically 2 big takeaways from me from this episode rather, even though it was for sure a filler episode. Number one is, I think the biggest takeaway was, I think Sid at some point this season is going to become the villain. I think she is going to be the one that turns on the Batch. I could be wrong, but they're kind of leaning that direction when the other gangster was talking about Sid to the Batch, basically telling them, hey, you know, be careful because, you know, she's not who she seems to be.
Yeah, I kind of got that. I kind of got that little tinge of some sort of double cross coming down the line, and I really hope that she's not the reason why the Empire gets back on their trail. I guess maybe that might be a little something in the future. And before we move off of Bad Batch, I wanted to also point out the other guest voice. And this is a game I like to play. It's just real quick sidebar. I love voice actors. I've already said that. I especially love it when, you know, well-established actors from other movies and TV shows and whatnot come in to guest voice things. So I like to play a little game with myself. When I hear a voice, I'm like, I'm not going to look it up. I want to figure it out. Anyway, the heavy in this episode, the bad guy, so to speak, as soon as I heard him speak, I was like, I know who that is. That is Ernie Hudson came to play the bad guy. Yep. That is Winston Zedmore himself, Ernie Hudson. So that was the other guest actor there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I should have paused the credits and look for that, but I guess I kind of don't do that unless I recognize the voice and I'm like, wait a minute, is that so? But I obviously you're much more versed in that department, so that's cool. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah.
And then my biggest takeaway from the episode, it's not as big as the Sid, you know, the actual direction of the show, but was it just me, Pete, or when you saw the episode when the droid, I forget the guy's name, gets destroyed and Omega kind of steps up and says, well, we need a racer. Were you waiting for her to volunteer to do the race instead of Tech?
I could see where you went with that, but they built it so well that Tech kept on like studying the schematics of the pod and looking at the race outline that it kind of, you know, to me, I already kind of knew that he was going to step in, but I can see what you're saying about Omega, you know, jump in the line and saying, you know, put me in, coach, that kind of thing, to kind of have like an Anakin moment with the pod race. Is that what you're doing? Yeah,
that's where I was going with that, because I think I've mentioned it on the show before, where I perceive Omega to be a Force sensitive clone and they haven't revealed that yet. So I was thinking there was a possibility that they could have gone that direction, drawing the parallel to, you know, Anakin from episode 1, where I'm just gonna call him Liam Neeson because I'm not remembering Qui-Gon's name at the moment. Thank you. Qui-Gon basically tells Anakin, you must have Jedi reflexes to be able to pod race, and he's like, I'm the only human who can do it. So I was kind of thinking there was a slight chance Omega might do that, but you're right. Ultimately, I told myself, no, they had already featured Tech so much about him analyzing the race. He was definitely going to be the one to step up, but the fanboy in me just like was hoping to get some answers to Omega already.
Yeah.
Okay. I saved this one for last because I think everybody's talking about this week. We got the Mandalorian season 3 trailer this past Monday during Monday Night Football halftime. And I got to tell you, Pete, I know I put on our notes to ask you your thoughts first, but I'm going to just tell you my thoughts first.
Please.
Since we've gotten so much from Star Wars this past year, Andor and Kenobi, it kind of really took me out of the Mandalorian, the Mandoverse, so to say. So I was thinking like, it's not, you know, the Mandoverse, the Mandalorian rather, is not as cool as what I perceived it to be when it was the only live action TV show. Mind you, we haven't seen it in over 2 years. But when I saw this,
been that long? Okay.
Yeah. If you really think about it, how long ago was that feeling of when you saw Luke Skywalker show up?
Yeah, that was like Christmas of 20. Yeah, right. Christmas.
Yeah, it's crazy, 20? Right?
Okay.
I think 21.
21.
I don't remember, but it was forever ago. So I've been so far removed from Mandalorian because all these other things have come out that when I saw the trailer, I was expecting, okay, we're gonna see Grogu. Obviously, they're gonna be doing all these little side adventures and all that. But what I got from this trailer was that I have a strong suspicion. I hope I'm right. Is that this is a heavily featured, in-depth Mandalorian story, and what I mean by that is there's a lot of stuff that's been shown in the animated series that we're waiting for answers for that I'll talk about here in a second. And I saw that, I got that vibe in the trailer, and I kind of got chills watching it because I was like, here it is. They're finally going to do it. I have so many questions. This is what I'm getting from the trailer. They show Mandalore completely ravaged. I mean, the live action flying sequence with the TIE interceptors and the, what is it called, a Mandalorian Gauntlet Starfighter, and then when he picks up the helmet, when he's going into that cave, like I'm thinking that there's more Mandalorian stuff here than there is Grogu stuff. That's what I'm kind of anxious to see.
Okay, so like Grogu's going to go back to what he was originally, was just a little featurette sidekick to him, where it's not all about, I mean, he doesn't have to save him anymore. He's got him. So now he can focus on the main Mandalore storyline. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I think so too, because I think in the first couple of seasons, we just wanted to know more about Grogu. And I think in Book of Boba Fett, we got some finalization in that Grogu's not going to be a Jedi. He's going to be a Mandalorian, like his new father. And I think now that that's established, sure, they showed the, what's his name, Dr. Pershing still in the trailer. So there's definitely going to be something there with Grogu. But I think at this point, now we're going to dive deep into Mandalorian lore. And what gets me excited is I hope that helmet that he picks up in that cave sequence is Tar Vizsla's, which is the first Mandalorian Jedi.
Okay. And
I just hope that that's where we're going, because, you know, we got so many questions now about the Darksaber after the end of Mando season 2. He's in possession of it. In the trailer, it looks like he's trying to unify all these scattered Mandalorians. I think it's headed in that direction, and I'm kind of like more hyped for the Mandalorian than I've ever been after seeing that trailer.
Yeah, definitely. And remind me that the name of the main Mando girl that was in the last Bo-Katan, sorry. Yes, I think we're definitely going to see her and her crew more. There's going to be more interaction, more team ups. I love that scene where the bottom of the carrier opens up and all the Mandos jump out, kind of like the paratroopers. That was a really cool sequence. So I am very much hyped about this. And I mean, I'm gonna pull back the curtain a little bit. I literally just watched it before we started recording, so it is fresh in my head. I had not seen it all week, but yeah, man, this is that looked really, really badass. And not to mention, we're gonna get another Order 66 flashback.
Yeah, so we are definitely getting answers for Grogu, even despite what I said. There has to be a reason for that. We already got the regular flashback. We get it. He was at the Jedi Temple. Now there has to be a reason why they're showing that sequence again. It's got to be from a different perspective. We're gonna get questions answered.
And then, not to mention the final scene in the trailer is little Grogu's in his little carrier thing, and some big looking like Yeti looking monster comes to try and kill him, and then all of a sudden you just cuts to the monster vete la chingada flying out the cave, and here comes little Grogu with his little hand using the Force. So obviously they're featuring that he's gotten stronger in the Force and in his power. I really love, I don't know if you've seen them, Rolly, the memes of people who are lost because why Grogu's back with Mando, because they didn't watch Book of Boba Fett.
Because they didn't watch the Book of Boba Fett. Yeah, I expect even more of those questions to start flying once the show is actually on air and they're like, wait a minute, can't make the connection to the end of season 2.
So yeah, it looks badass, and it's coming at you in about 6 weeks, starting March 1st. So that's pretty cool. Yeah,
gonna get here real quick. I'm excited. All right, let's round out this week in Star Wars like we always do with some birthdays. We had some big ones this week. Probably the biggest one, let's start off the list, James Earl Jones, January 17th. He voices Darth Vader. Need I say more, in the original Star Wars trilogy. Yep. And I think he's 98 or something crazy, right?
Something like that, dude. Like he's up there. And just a reminder, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, or a couple months ago at this point, when we were talking about Kenobi. I think it is incredibly badass that basically he licensed his voice to Disney, and he will be Vader in perpetuity because they have these special magic Disney computers that can replicate his voice and make Vader say anything for the rest of our lives. And I think that is incredibly badass.
Yeah, absolutely. And next on our list, I always sympathize for this girl because I actually liked her character in the movies. Kelly Marie Tran, January 17th. She plays Rose Tico in The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. And if she's listening, you have a fan here.
Yeah.
But if she is listening, It'd be really cool that she was.
Yeah, she got a really raw deal as far as the backlash for her character. So yeah, we always sympathize with those kind of those people that get unfortunately torn apart by the fandom menace, as we like to call it, the trolls out there. So
next on our list we have Dave Fennoy, January 20th. He plays the very controversial and very hated Pong Krell in Clone Wars.
I don't remember him.
Well, you're gonna remember him after I remind you of. He is remember Dex from Attack of the Clones, the one that works at the diner?
Yes.
Okay, he's that same species.
Oh, okay.
Pong Krell's the Jedi general who hates the clones, and he's purposely sending them to their death.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to, once I look up the picture for the edit, I'll be reminded, because I'm still not. So he's kind of like he's basically like he's a Jedi, but he's a villain because he is basically, for all intents and purposes, racist against the clones. So he's using them as like, just meat and pawns, right. Sending them to battles they're not going to win. It's a really cool arc. Once you see the character, you're gonna be like, oh, I remember how I dreaded watching that arc. Right.
Next on our list, we have Olivia Dabo. She voices Luminara Unduli in the Clone Wars, and you guys might also remember her from the Wonder Years.
Yes, I just put that together. I forgot that she played Luminara. Wow. Okay, that was a good reminder.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super interesting, right? Who they get to voice some of these characters.
Yeah.
And then last but certainly not least on our list, Ross Marcus Biedman, January 23rd. He plays the infamous Soars Bandim, which is the youngling that says, Master Skywalker, what are we going to do? Right before he's probably the first youngling that's off.
Yeah. Oh man, that kid he will live in infamy forever too. I wonder if he's on the con circuit signing that one headshot of like him looking frightened as the lightsaber turns on.
I'm pretty certain he is. I saw when I was doing my birthday research this week, I saw he had a picture with Hayden Christensen, and he was already older. So I think there's something very recent that he did, and just because that one line, he's gonna be famous for the rest of Star Wars fandom existence.
That's all it takes, man. That's all it takes. It's like a brotherhood. Once you're in this world of Star Wars, you're in it for life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's cool to hear some of those actors talk about exactly what you're saying. I know recently Michelle Ong was talking about that, how she was basically nervous to be in the Star Wars fandom. She was scared to talk to fans rather than the opposite, just because she was new and she voices Omega, so there's kind of like some people who don't like her, so she was kind of like nervous. But no, it turned out everybody welcomed her into the Star Wars verse at the last celebration.
Yeah. Okay, so that wraps up this week in Star Wars segment. Rolly, why don't we move on to Rebels and hit us with a synopsis of this week's episode?
In this week's episode, Zeb and Agent Kallus find themselves stranded on an icy moon of Geonosis after a failed Imperial ambush of the Rebels. Bitter enemies, they must put aside their differences and work together in order to survive. Okay,
so I said at the top a couple times, dude, I freaking loved this episode. I really did. There was so much information. It was so much. And anytime it comes to Zeb and what happened on his home planet, the mass genocide, I guess is what they've alluded to.
Yeah,
I'm all about it. So anytime they can just give us a little nugget of information, that's a-okay with me. So basically, the show opens with the Ghost crew approaching Geonosis to investigate Imperial construction modules that were picked up by the Rebel intelligence. So Ezra says, Rebel intelligence was right. The Empire was building something over Geonosis. And Sabine says, yeah, but what? I've never seen an orbital construction field this big. And Kanan says, the Geonosans made weapons back in the Clone Wars. Whatever they were up to, I'm betting we're not going to like it. Zeb says, must have been huge if they had to build it up here instead of down on the surface. And Hera says, Chopper, run a planetary scan. Rex says, good idea. I know through experience the bugs down there, don't take to unexpected guests. Chopper scans and gives the team an update. And Sabine says, no life. And Rex says, you crosswired? There are billions of bugs on Geonosis. Scan again. Ezra says, they're dead. All of them. And the rebels land on one of the construction modules to investigate further, only to walk right into a trap set by Agent Kallus and the Empire. So take it from there.
So first and foremost, before we continue, you guys will remember Geonosis as the planet that's heavily featured in Attack of the Clones. You know, that's where Anakin and Obi-Wan and Padme are captured, and sure, it's basically a bug colony. We also get a bit of it in Clone Wars. And what was really cool in that scene is the way Ezra says they're dead, all of them. Yet again, further showing you how strong Ezra has become with the Force, that he's able to connect, you know, to these living creatures. Because these creatures, I would say, they are more like animalistic. I don't want to be racist, Star Wars racist.
Let's call him feral.
There you go. Okay, there you go. They're more so creatures, like with the creatures he's connecting with, more so than humanoids. So I kind of made that connection there, and you can tell Ezra feels very cold and very like sad about the fact that he cannot pick up any life forms as he's trying to connect with them through the Force.
Mm-hmm.
So getting back to the episode, we mentioned the rebels basically are walking right into a trap that's set by Agent Kallus and the Empire. So in the middle of the trap, the rebels and the Empire begin to engage in combat, with an Imperial astromech droid locking in the rebels with the Imps. Kallus and Zeb become entangled in hand-to-hand combat, as Zeb still holds Kallus responsible for the destruction of his people. Chopper is deployed to deal with the Imperial droid and free the rebels from the trap so that they can escape. The rebels do manage to get out of the predicament, but Zeb can't join their escape as he is still busy fighting with Kallus. Zeb informs the team he has an escape route of his own on an escape pod, but Kallus follows Zeb into the pod and continues the fight in the pod. The rebels note that Zeb's pod is heading to Geonosis, so of course they can easily track him and save him after the scuffle. But during the fight on the pod, one of the pod thrusters becomes damaged, and it ends up sending the pod on a course to a nearby moon. The pod crash lands into an underground cave below the icy planet, with Kallus breaking his leg on the impact.
Right. And just a side note, if you guys can hear my dog barking, please excuse me. She has a problem right now. I think her ball got stuck under the couch. So anyway, please. Sorry about that.
Well, I guess that goes hand in hand with this scene where Kallus breaks his leg and basically screams and passes out from the excruciating pain. Yeah, look, another cool note I wanted to put on this before we continue is I found it strange and cool that the moon was an ice planet, very similar to Hoth, even though Geonosis is a dry planet. So I don't know. I thought just an interesting tidbit. I don't know the name of the moon, but it's already a really cool. Anytime we have like an extreme environment in Star Wars like that, like I'm a big fan of Empire Strikes Back, the Battle of Hoth. You're a big fan of Return of the Jedi, the Endor setting. I always think that those are like the cooler scenic elements in Star Wars.
Right, like the open air battles kind of a thing.
Yeah. So after they crash land, Zeb and Kallus, they basically pass out from the impact for a while, and they awaken from the crash landing. And Zeb, of course, you know, he hates Kallus for everything that he's done to his people. So he's put in this position where he can eliminate him.
Yes.
But he realizes he doesn't want to best his opponent while he is injured and unable to fight. It just isn't the Lasat way.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. So the two proceed to have a brief conversation about the situation that they're put in. And Kallus says, "You're expecting your rebel friends to come to your rescue? Your friends fled. If anyone finds us, it'll be the Empire, and you'll be captured." Zeb responds, "Well, that's not going to happen." And Kallus says, "It'll be night soon." Zeb says, "Don't tell me you're afraid of the dark." And Kallus responds, "It's not just going to get dark. It's going to get colder. Too cold for this to keep us warm." And he's referring to this little like heater, you know, tech item that they have.
Yeah.
And Zeb says, "And here I thought Geonosis was a desert planet." And Kallus points to the planet in the sky because they crash landed in this cave, and they can see the clear sky above them, even though they're stuck in a cave, and you can see the brown or red planet of Geonosis above them. Mm-hmm. And he points to the sky and says, "That is Geonosis. We are on one of its moons. How is it that you have bested me even once?" He's obviously implying that Zeb's stupid for thinking that they're on Geonosis at that moment.
Right.
So Zeb goes, "Oh, get a sense of humor, Agent." And Kallus responds, "The transponder, probably damaged in the crash. If you can repair it, reactivate its signal, maybe the Empire will find us before we freeze." And as he says this, they hear like a loud creature roar in the distance. And then Kallus says, "Or worse." And Zeb responds, I'll take my chances with the cold and whatever we're sharing this hole with. I know what happens to Lasat in an Imperial prison. And Callus says, you don't know much. Cooperate and you will get a trial. And when Callus responds and says, you don't know much, you already get a gist of what's going to happen in the episode, because Callus knows more about that. What's the term when they off the entire race?
Genocide.
The genocide. Callus knows more about the genocide of the Lasat than he's leading on. He seemed very cocky and brutal about it in the past, but just like that smirk, that face he makes to Zeb when Zeb tells him that comment,
right,
you already know that it's not true from this early on in the episode, or not entirely true, rather. Like
basically every interaction that Callus and Zeb have had in the past episodes, there's been some sort of a mention or a hint or something that Callus knows more about what happened on Lasan than he lets up, like you're saying, and he might have actually been directly involved in it. So that's always been kind of like the narrative going forward. So in this episode, that's why I enjoyed it so much, is because it's like one of those bottle episodes where it's two characters stuck in one setting and they're forced to interact with each other, and that's, the two guys that have the most mystery about them whenever they interact in previous episodes. So it all works up to this point.
Yeah, and up to this point, every time you see Callus, he's carrying around a Lasat bow rifle. So you always know that there's history there. There's questions that have not been answered that we get to fortunately get answered in this episode.
Right.
So the Ghost crew is looking for Zeb, but they're scanning Geonosis, and they're obviously not there, so they're not having any luck. So the Phantom returns to the Ghost crew from the Geonosis surface, and Ezra and Kanan were unable to locate any life forms on the planet, along with no sign of the pod anywhere on the surface. They have also scanned all frequencies for the transponder, but have picked up nothing. Rex alerts Hera that they need to locate Zeb soon, as it's only a matter of time before Imperial reinforcements arrive. Hera agrees, and she alerts the team that they need to work faster and widen all the scans. So back in the cave, Zeb tinkers with a transponder in an attempt to fix its signal. Zeb says, there, fixed it, and I adjusted the frequency. Now anyone can pick up its signal. And Callus goes, so? Maybe you won't die today, but the Empire will win. Every day we recruit more informers. Every day we persuade rebel sympathizers to reconsider their allegiances. Zeb responds, and every day more beings get fed up with the Empire and join us, referring to the rebels. Callus says its power cell is frozen and will be next. He's referring to the small space heater
yes
that they have starting to give out. So because of that, Zeb begins to search the cave for some kind of answer, and he ends up finding this like glowing meteorite. At least that's what Callus refers to it as too, and it's giving off warm energy. So Callus says, what did you find? What is that? And Zeb says, I don't know, but it's warm and it throws light. And Callus responds, probably some kind of meteorite. Zeb goes, here, warm yourself up. Which was strange. He's kind of being incredibly friendly to Callus. And Callus says, you really think we'll survive with whatever that is in there? Plus the temperature's dropping, and our only heat source is this thing. And who knows how long it'll last. Zeb says, you're so quick to give up hope. Like I said, the transponder's working. My friends will find us. Callus says, the transponder signal will never get through the ice. And Zeb says, yeah, you're probably right actually. But Lasat never know when to give up, remember? We'll just climb this up to the surface. So after that, Zeb immediately begins to make an attempt to climb out of the cave. And it's kind of weird because the cave that they're in, it's kind of like a concave. I guess that makes sense. Concave, convex. You guys know what I'm talking about.
Right.
But basically, like, think of it like a fishbowl, to where if he wanted to climb out, he has to go at an unnecessary arc in order to get to the top.
Right.
And it just seems impossible. But Zeb has he's kind of like a cat. The Lasat are kind of like cats. So he has some kind of like sticky appendages or whatever that allows him to possibly, attempt the feat. So sure enough, he begins to climb out of the cave, but he fails and he falls like at least a few times over every time he gets near the top of getting out. In the process of him falling, Zeb proceeds to alert the beasts that are in the cave to their presence, and the beast comes out of the shadows and he begins to attack Zeb. And it's kind of cool. It's kind of like this like Triceratops almost looking creature that has like exoskeletal armor. So it doesn't seem like you can actually do anything to them. So the beast begins to fight with Zeb. Zeb's kind of trying to blast it with his bow rifle. It's not really working, so he kind of jumps and hides in the crashed escape pod. And while he's doing that, Callus gets his bow rifle out because he has his own, of course. And there's kind of like a moment where he's thinking, I can just kill Zeb right now. But then he kind of takes aim at the creature instead and begins to shoot the creature instead. And he does proceed to scare it away. So he ends up saving Zeb and himself from temporarily, basically being eaten by this creature. So after the attack, now we've had two instances where Zeb has basically saved Callus and Callus has now saved Zeb. So you're going to start seeing them connect here. And they end up having a deeper conversation following that attack. And Callus says, what was that? And Zeb goes, I don't know, but it's probably going to come back. Callus says, yeah, and it's probably going to bring its friends. That is the order of things. The strong survive, the weak perish. And Zeb takes offense to that comment and he says, is that what happened on Geonosis? The weak needed to perish? And Callus responds, the only thing I know about Geonosis is that the population is gone. I never asked questions. Zeb says, well, maybe you should start. Or are you afraid of the answers you'll get? Afraid you'll learn the Geonosians were wiped out by your precious empire. Callus says, and why would we do that? What could possibly have been the point? Zeb goes, good questions. Chase the answers and maybe you'll learn the truth. Callus says, you'll never get out of here without my help. Zeb says, you're in no shape to help anybody. Callus responds, I can tell you exactly how to climb out of here. And Zeb says, all right, we'll work together then. So Zeb begins adjusting Callus's bow rifle to kind of work like a splint that he's going to tie to Callus's leg to at least allow him to, limp around, use that leg to some extent. It's completely broken. And Zeb says, I see you modified it for close quarters fighting. Impressive, but you shouldn't have. It's not a trophy. And Callus says, I didn't take it as a trophy. The Lasat guardsman I faced, he fought well, died with honor. He gave me the rifle before, and then Zeb cuts him off and says, the Boonsod Kira. It's the Lasat warrior way. When one is defeated by a superior foe, he gifts his weapon. And Callus is already feeling shameful at this point. He's kind of hesitating in the words as he's speaking to Zeb here, because he's remembering, his encounter with the Lasat. And Callus says, I was only doing my duty. It was nothing personal. And Zeb says, yeah, well, what the Empire did on Lasan, I'll never forget it. And then Callus proceeds to tell his account of the story and says, we all have things we won't forget. I remember my first unit. The boys and I were deployed to Onderon to bring peace and security to a troubled world. We were on a routine patrol and ran into one of your rebel friends, a Lasat mercenary who worked for Saul Guerrera. I was lucky, knocked out by the first blast. I came to, but found out I couldn't move. And then I saw him, the Lasat, calmly walk through smoke and fire to finish my unit off one by one. The injured never had a chance, always wondered why he let me live. And Zeb says, well, you can't judge all Lasats the same. And Callus says, does that sentiment apply to Imperials? And Zeb says, all the Imperials I know. So when he's telling them that story, you can kind of see the realization set in on Zeb's face that Callus seems to be some kind of a victim of the system here by the Imperials. Almost kind of similar to Solo, when we see Solo at the beginning join the Imperial army, and he doesn't want to do what they're doing, and it leads to him getting imprisoned and so forth. And that's kind of like the parallel I drew from this conversation, even though Callus is still very much an Imperial at large at this point. So after sharing that conversation, Zeb and Callus prepare for the climb out of the cave together. And obviously this is going to be a very difficult task because Callus can't walk, much less climb. So Zeb's going to have to carry him on his back. And Callus tells Zeb that he needs to climb the pillars of the cave to get out rather than scale the wall like Zeb was attempting to do. The pair begin to climb the pillar with incredible difficulty since Zeb is carrying all the weight of Callus. The beast returns along with the second beast, ready to finish off the two for dinner. With great acrobatics and a little luck, Zeb is able to slingshot Callus to the top of the surface of the planet, while Zeb is left hanging on the side of the cave. So we see Zeb get put into this vulnerable position where Callus is now able to stand up. He gets his rifle and points it yet again at Zeb, deciding, should I finish this rebel off here that's been helping me, or do I help him? So what he ends up doing is he actually takes a shot again. He makes the exact same move he made in the cave, and he shoots the beast to get him off of Zeb. And after he does that, he extends his hand to help Zeb get out of the cave.
Right.
So I just love so far how you're seeing Callus basically turn good, so to say, in this episode, and you're seeing it as the episode progresses. You see it in the conversation, but more importantly, you see it in the actions of what's happening here between the two. So now that they're on the surface, they're hoping to be found. Zeb and Callus proceed to talk more. Obviously, this episode is very dialogue intensive.
Yeah.
So I wanted to capture all of it. Callus says, better activate the transponder. It's a lot colder up here. We won't last much longer. And Zeb says, yeah, but I think I'd rather freeze than be eaten. Let's hope it works. Callus says, of course, since you adjusted it, we don't know who will pick it up. We don't know who will pick up its signal. And Zeb says, guess all we can do is wait. At least we've got this to keep us warm. Again, referring to the meteorite. Callus says, still think your friends will find you first? And Zeb goes, unless the Empire gets here before them. And Callus goes, on Lasan, it wasn't supposed to be a massacre. But I realized the Empire wanted to make an example. I know before I took credit for it. And Zeb kind of cuts him off and says, listen, what happened in Lasan, it's over for me. I've moved on. By the way, it's Zeb. My name, it's Zeb. And Callus goes, short for Garazeb. I know. So almost like a peace offering from Zeb, basically saying, you know, thanks for everything that you've told me. I see it differently now. I see what you've been, quote unquote, suffering through from your perspective of what happened to my people. So, so we start getting some closure on this episode, and it kind of happens for both parties. First and foremost, they're resting there, and a ship appears in the distance. And of course, as you probably would have guessed it, it's the Ghost. Unfortunately for Zeb, it isn't indeed the Ghost. And Zeb kind of picks Callus up and says, hey, you know, come with me. We'll treat you fairly. And Callus tells Zeb that he's going to go ahead and take his chances with the Empire instead. I don't think for Callus it's that easy to just leave. Yeah. I think obviously the punishment is more severe than if he was already potentially a rebel or whatever. So Zeb proceeds to bow in respect of Callus before leaving him to join his team. And Callus ends up staying behind to wait for the Imperial rescue, as Zeb himself ponders his time spent with Callus along with his words. We kind of get the scene where Zeb is walking onto the Ghost and he looks back, almost like concerned for Callus. Is he going to be found? Is this the last time he's going to see Callus? Is he going to freeze to death? But then shortly after that, we find out that that's not the case. Callus does end up getting picked up by the Imperials.
Just in that same vein, I mean, I found it very interesting that Zeb, he let a prisoner of war go basically without telling the rest of his crew that, hey, this guy's still alive and he's here, he's injured, let's pick him up. You know, he gave him the option to come with him, and Callus said, no, I'll wait. And he said, okay then, but at the same time, he kind of, it's not treasonous, I don't want to say that word, but you know what I'm saying? Like he just kind of let him survive. He let him go without becoming a prisoner, which that in itself was a big deal, all things considered, I thought.
Yeah, for sure. It was kind of like, this is between us. I'm not going to tell the rebels about this. And hopefully you don't tell, well, I don't know. I guess you could say hopefully Callus doesn't tell the Imperials about his experience with the rebels either, because it ultimately could lead to them finding them. But that was a really good point.
Callus can't tell them either, because then they're going to say, well, why didn't you take him out when you had the chance? You know, so
exactly.
It's kind of like a what is it, like mutual destruction kind of a thing?
Yeah, for sure. So getting back to the episode, like I said, we don't see the Imperials literally pick up Callus, but the final sequence in this episode is we see Callus back on the Star Destroyer. Like, he's just barely arriving, and the guy is just like, he's gone. Like he's limping around, he feels worthless, whatever. So he's limping through the hallway trying to get back to his quarters, and he runs into one of the admirals we've seen a few times over on Rebels. His name's Admiral Constantine. And you can kind of tell he calls out Constantine, like basically implying, I'm here, you know, I made it, I'm alive. He doesn't say anything besides Admiral Constantine, but you can see the expression on his face. He wants some kind of sympathy for everything that he's been through.
Right.
And the Admiral kind of just looks down on him, and the only acknowledgement Constantine gives him is he says his name, Agent Callus, and then proceeds to continue walking and go about his business. So after that, they show Callus finally get back to his quarters, and he opens the door, and they made it very direct. I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. They made it a point of emphasis to show you this large empty room with just a small cot and some cabinets for his personal items, but there's no personalization in the room. It's very empire-ish. It's very
almost like a 1 degree above a prison cell.
Basically, yeah. So they show Callus kind of stare at it, and the music that's playing, it's very sad, sorrowful. You start feeling bad for Callus at that point, because he's realizing, what am I doing? What has the Empire done for me? This Lasat has done more for me than the Empire has given me my entire career.
Yeah.
So, and then to end the show, he sits down on the empty cot, and he pulls out the meteorite that he held on to, and he stares at it. And to me, that kind of implied this is a memento for when somebody that has every reason to hate me, because I've basically more or less been responsible for the genocide of his people, still to that point, still helped me. He saved my life. I'm alive because of him, and he's holding that peace, and that's where the episode ends.
Right. I mean, the way that last scene was structured, the last two scenes of the episode was structured, the juxtaposition of when Zeb comes on board the Ghost, and the crew welcomes him like a family member.
Yes.
We're so glad that you're home, and we knew we'd find you, buddy, that kind of thing. The warmth of the family versus the coldness of the empty cell that Callus is in, that was a perfect, that scene was set up perfectly to make the audience feel exactly what we felt, and it knocked it out of the park. And one of the many reasons this episode was really, really important, and I very much enjoyed it.
Yeah, I remember when I saw the little intro, the synopsis, when you watching it on Disney Plus, it shows you the next one, and it showed that last week. After I saw last week's episode, I was like, oh man, I can't wait to rewatch this episode, because I knew that this is a standout episode. When you love character development, as I'm sure Pete does also, these are the episodes you live for.
Absolutely. All right, well, that brings us to the end of our recap of this episode, and that also brings us to the end of Good Morning Lothal, the unofficial Star Wars Rebels podcast. Had a great time talking to you, Rolly, about this one. This was a good one. It was a deep episode. It was one of those bottle episodes where it's just very, very centralized around one or two characters, and it was very important to the whole structure and the backstory of one of the main rebels, and thoroughly enjoyed it. So if you all enjoyed it, please let us know. Jump in the comments, drop us a line, and please like, share, subscribe, and rate. Rolly, anything left to say?
No, just want to note that this is the beginning. This is definitely a tease of what's to come in future episodes. So we're going to see more from Callus and Zeb as far as their relationship going forward.
Right. So next week we'll be talking about episode 18 of season 2. It's called Shroud of Darkness. So we look forward to getting back to you and talking about that next week. So if nothing else, this has been your host, Pete Salas, along with
Rolando Zamora,
saying, may the Force be with you always. Goodbye from Lothal.